Oh my God. I'm backstage talking to Dave. I said, man, I don't turn my camera on until right before I go live because it always freezes. And I'd be darned if I didn't turn my camera on and it froze as soon as I turned it on. So give me a second. All right. It'll get a little bit better. I promise. All right. What is going on, everybody? My name is Sam. If you're all here, I have a YouTube channel. It's called Outdoors in Maryland. And I started this podcast in December. And basically, it was going into like some local tackle shops, promote them, um, just get the word out about them. I've been in Edgemere Bait and Tackle. I've been in Rusty Hook. I've been to Henlopen in Delaware. We are heading, actually, I'm getting ready to head down to Delaware Paddle Sports. That is April the 20th. That's going to be the week before um, the snakehead tournaments with the Legion of Anglers starts. Okay. Next week, I am going to have Damian Cook on from Lowland Outfitters. He's going to come on next Tuesday night at 7, and we're going to talk about his guide service, snakeheads, his world record. He's got I think Thursday night they're going to be doing a live on Legion of Anglers. You check them out. Rashawn's going to be in there. Rashawn's going to be with me from Legion of Anglers. I do want to bring up this. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Paulie just sent this to me, and with CCA and these guys, we're going to share this real quick. All right, this is the Maryland Catfish Trail, and this is Fish Hunt Maryland. My buddy Paulie sent this to me, and I told him I would put it on there. So with CCA and with them, they are really trying to push for the invasive species, and this one is the Maryland Catfish Trail. It says dive into the Maryland Catfish Trail and join the fight against invasive species threatening our waters, from blue catfish to northern snakeheads. These formidable creatures disrupt Maryland's ecosystem. But with your help, we can make a difference, discover prime fishing spots, expert tips, and tournaments to reel in these giants while preserving the Chesapeake Bay. All right, there's all kind of stuff. So go to Fish Hunt Maryland, check it out. And Dave's going to come on. I know they have something really cool going on with snakeheads himself. All right, let me I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I'm good with that right now. All right, so let me tell you what to have this man on has been it almost didn't happen. I was kind of told that, you know, if I had him on, give him a platform, that the watermen's here, and the commercial watermen probably wouldn't have nothing to do with me. Wouldn't want to talk with me. And, you know, and I almost didn't do it because of that. But there's only one commercial person that I worry about. And as long as I got the permission from her, that's kind of all that mattered to me. It kind of brought me back up a couple months ago, and bear with me on this. A couple months ago, CNN, the most liberal news outlet there is, has a town hall, and not only do they bring Donald Trump on, they bring a lot of their supporters on. Well, a lot of people lost their freaking minds because of that, but a lot of people might not have heard that side of it. All right, so I just decided that if you're not going to like me because of that, I apologize, but we're going to ask David, is a CCA, are they trying to put these commercial guys out of business? Are they making, I know he stands for more for the recreational guys and stuff like that, but last year, exactly this time, I actually had a live stream with Captain Robert Newberry, and he did a lot with the catfish, oysters, and crabbing. A couple weeks ago, I had a live stream with Ken Jeffries. He's a lobbyist for he's with the Charter Boat Association, and I thought it was a good interview. But I had a gentleman, we talked about it, and he said a lot of what he said was not true. And because I'm just really a recreational guy, and I keep telling everybody, I go for stripers maybe once or twice at the end of October into November to go striper fishing because me and my wife, we do crabbing all the time. And when the crabbing season ends for us, I'll go out. I love that shallow water. I'm a bass fisherman by heart. So that shallow water, top water, trying to catch a striper. I'm not after them big giant ones. It's nice to have. I got my 41 incher. I went trolling a long time ago. I got one of those, and it was fun, but I'm not a trolling kind of guy. I think it's boring as hell. I rather go up and cast and have a couple, have a nice 20-inch, 25-incher come and nail it on top water. That's kind of what I like. All right. So I'm going to bring David up, and he's going to show, he's got some charts and everything. And I'm going to try to do my best to ask him some questions that I think the commercial guys want. And look, you can ask him anything you want in here. And I really would appreciate, we are all grown-ups. All right. I know this is people's livelihoods, and a lot of this stuff is so political. It really kind of sucks. So, but he's going to come on. I'm going to try to ask him questions and everything. But, and I just be polite, because he's been nice to me. We've had discussions. I have not went over at anything of what we're going to be talking about. So we're just going to, was that okay intro, man? I mean, I'm trying to make it as nice as possible, but for, I hear bad things about C.C.A. from Texas.
Yeah.
North Carolina, you guys are taking fish from people. They're not getting the fish back. I have a little issues with the concrete. I know you really love that. You really had that concrete thing going on, putting the balls in there, and it works. It isn't saying that it don't work.
Yep.
So we're going to let you, let me make sure I did all the uptight things, and I talked about Jeffries on there. All right. But real quick, what I'll say, why I really like standing with commercial guys, is because as a recreational guy, I get to go on a commercial crab boat a couple times a year. I get to go on a commercial oyster boat and watch how hard, because this job, and I hear how they always say that, they're always trying to put us out of business. They're always trying to make it harder on us to make a living. Now, I understand that everybody has to do their part to help save the resource. I mean, isn't it? I mean, that's basically, I hope that's a good analogy to say that everybody needs to do their part. But like I said, the commercial guys are really saying that, they were really slapped in the face, because Jeffries had mentioned that they, how do you put it? At all the recreational guys, and what they did, the commercial guys, they had to keep track for about the last 8 years. They got to keep track of everything they catch, what they caught, how many people had on boat, where they caught, it's a record they keep of a good record. And with that record, they don't understand why, since they only catch maybe, I think he was saying about 4% of the total that's supposed to be caught that year, why they would actually get cut 50% of their creel.
Right. So I know
I'm talking.
So yeah. No, I mean, it's a conversation, and I'll gladly answer questions that come through. There's so much to talk about that I could start on a C.C.A. story, the history in Texas all the way to through where we are today. I'm happy to talk about all that stuff, but you talk about you being just a recreational fisherman, you having friends that are in commercial fisheries. I'm the same way. I recreational fish. I buy fish from the seafood market. I buy from oyster farmers. I buy from wild fishery oyster harvesters. I'm a Maryland public, member of the Maryland public, just like you. And there's a long history of attempting to manage these public natural resources. And really in recorded history, it goes back in time to the Roman Empire. And the Roman Emperor Justinian, who said the seas, the shores of the sea, the waters, the air is common to everyone. And I think we're talking the year like 525-ish. And so that's, everybody understands, I think, the structure and such of the Roman Empire has led a lot to our structure we have in our country, a Senate and this idea of a republic and all those types of things. So ultimately, if you think about it from a legal perspective or this foundational principle perspective, you have this public trust resource concept. Started back in the Roman Empire. is common in English common law, and as an English colony is common in the US. And so there's this overarching idea of what's called the public trust doctrine. And our laws and our structures of managing our natural resources in this country are all kind of are based on that concept. Ultimately, you have to get down to the black and white of what a law says, what it allows, what it doesn't allow, what it requires government agencies to do on behalf of the public in managing the resource. And that's the very complex reality that all of us really that are connected to this resource, whether it's making a living off of it or going out there to catch our own dinner or going out there to drive, recreational benefit, we're all using this public resource in some way. And like it or not, it's an exercise of democracy, of representative, being a representative of an industry or of a perspective. And all of that ultimately has led to where CCA is today, which is an organization that was created to fill a void of representation that they felt was needed in the Gulf in the late 1970s. And in the late 1970s, it was a formative time for our country and our fisheries management laws. In 1976, the Magnuson-Stevens Act passed on a federal level, defining what the U.S. territories are, how we manage them through federal fishery management councils, where legal authorities lie across these components of U.S. territory and water territory. The exclusive economic zone was officially created at that point, and that's from 3 miles out to 200 miles. And that's a place that our National Marine Fisheries Service, or NOAA Fisheries, manages through the Department of Commerce. And so there's these very complicated precedents and such that have continued to play out in the fisheries management world. And again, that's where CCA has always been involved in it. There's a big story of our founding. It was actually just put to video, and I was going to share it. I'm going to share it in the chat so folks can check it out after this, because it's a video. It'll take me a while to watch it, but it's something called Redfish Revival, and it's a story of the founding of CCA. It's the voices of some of the members that were active in helping shape CCA at that time. And this is the early 80s, a time that I was born. So I was born in 1982, right here in Maryland. But it speaks to the history. I don't feel as young, and I don't look as young as I used to be.
Hey, look, my stuff's white, but I mean, it's not even gray. It's white.
I'm getting there. But ultimately, there's this long history of CCA now. And I would encourage people to check out the redfish stuff, because there were battles. There were battles over inshore gill nets and whether they could be used. It all started based on a collapse in the fishery, and people in the general public that work hard all week, have houses down the shore, the Texas Gulf Coast, were just upset with the prevailing situation. And it's not as simple as it being a commercial fisher's fault that a resource is in a certain condition. But ultimately, when you have less fish, people get fired up and they get organized and they get involved. And again, I wasn't born yet when these battles were happening. Was just being born when they really came to fruition in Texas. But ultimately, the Texans, they went to their state legislature, and the legislature in the end banned inshore gill nets and started working their way towards game fish status for speckled trout and redfish. And it is history, and there's a lot of complexity there about who played what role. But it's, I encourage people to look it up, and people have every right to be frustrated by CCA if they feel like they were on the losing side of those battles. I look at it kind of going back to that concept of the public trust doctrine. If you look at our website, our mission, our focus, it's all things that are supposed to be beneficial for the general public. And so I think when you have to remove access for the general public in one way or another, it's a failure. And I think that's what leads to these banning or one side versus the other. I think largely it's a failure of our agencies, which we entrust to manage these resources, whether it be on a state level, a regional level, or a federal level. They have a job to do, and it's never going to be easy because, again, look at our government. I mean, come on, it's not like political divide and debate is nothing new in this country.
It's great.
It's
that's the whole reason. It's the only reason. Yeah. One of the reasons I brought you on is because, look, if something you might say, somebody might go aha, and and somebody might say you're full of shit. I mean, just like that's the way everybody is. But I think one of the things that was pointed out to me is that CCA really wants to make the striper a game fish, and if you make that striper a game fish, don't that pretty much take away the commercial guy, and then you take away being able to go out and sell it into the restaurant, sell it into to like we were just at a seafood store that had all kind of from grouper, rockfish, white perch. It had crab, shrimp, so it had all this seafood. You make it a game fish, that's not really going to be access to, for somebody that can't fish for them, be able to have them that, isn't interested in fishing to go get them themselves.
Right. Well, there's two things when it comes to game fish. One thing is you have to define it. And quite often it's defined as there is no commercial fishery. The only access for the public is through the recreational fishery. They're not going to find it in their grocer, freezer at the fish market, et cetera. And that ultimately means that somebody's not allowed to catch a fish. They probably once were. And you also have this other prevailing situation in our country, which is important to understand because it's well outside of the box of me and a stakeholder group like CCA versus a stakeholder group like the Maryland Watermen's Association. But we have this national trend that's been happening since 1976. I met a guy who just recently passed, but was a lobster fisherman of just the highest regard, a guy named Jimmy Rule, who talked to me about his experiences in the 70s. And we were sitting around at actually a fisheries management education program I'm fortunate enough to take part in. And Jimmy was saying that I think it was in 1976 when Magnuson was passed, one of the goals was specifically to defend our nation's commercial fisheries and our territories. And there was something like, I think 23% of our seafood that we consumed in this country at that point was imported. So we were relying upon domestic seafood at 77%. Now we're importing 91% of what's consumed in the country. And so the seafood conversation is so much bigger than CCA versus another group, especially on this Maryland scale. And that's a whole driver that relates to the plight that the commercial fisheries have in our country and the losses of opportunity, the losses of working waterfronts, and the losses of all these economic benefits that happen. And there's no question that CCA is involved in advocating for outcomes that are more important to the recreational fisher than the commercial. But I'll tell you, there's very rarely a moment that I think, okay, how are we going to stick it to the commercial guys this time? Because it's like, that's not a way to properly operate in this arena. That's not what our goals are. It could be what an outcome might be. And specifically to striped bass, let me tell you point blank, we have never had an initiative to make striped bass a game fish. And there's groups out there that have, and there's friction amongst the recreational fishing groups, just like anywhere else in this world, one group versus another, sharing misinformation. I actually waste more of my time trying to shoot down misinformation about our organization or what we're actually up to than working towards some sort of positive outcome. And for striped bass, a positive outcome would be a balanced commercial fishery that absolutely supports important jobs in our state and many others, and maintaining a biomass of fish which supports a robust recreational fishery. And I'll tell you, from the Maryland perspective, Maryland DNR has failed in trying to accomplish that over the last decade plus that I've been involved. I think some of the other, some of the other states have, I don't know what their decision making looks like, but ultimately they have the decisions to make too. I mean, there's a lot of states out there with commercial and recreational fisheries. There's states like New Jersey, which chose to close their commercial fishery the last time striped bass was in decline in the early 80s. And now they allow it to be open access recreational. That's a decision that state made. And it's really important to understand within striped bass that the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission and how it works and what it is. This is where I can actually share a page or share a slide real quick and just kind of show folks that if you're interested in this stuff, which most people aren't, and I get it, it's not for everyone.
Yeah, there's more people. Yeah. I thought we would actually have a good bunch of people in here because I'm sure you're going to have some commercial guys on here. And I think, I won't lie to you, I think Captain Robert was telling me he was trying to come up, but I don't think I sent him the link, so he couldn't come up. That wouldn't. That should be a hoot, right? Hold on.
Well, I wanted to show people some things in actual writing. Like this is what we do on our website here. It's literally our mission, our objective. These are the words that I truly think about when we enact something or we do something. And it's ensuring the health and conservation of our resource. Like I said, a high abundance of our resource. That's our goal. And anglers access to them. And anglers are the general public, yes. So through recreational angling pursuits, like that is our core. That doesn't automatically guarantee that it's some anti-other group type approach. Our goal is it's not zero sum. It's not, okay, who gets what? It's not this allocation debate. When for people that are directly invested from a business perspective, it is. Their business is on the line. And so there's a lot of complexity that our country doesn't know how to handle in the fisheries management system. We're going through this evolution where you have people that have economic means to go recreate, to catch a fish, release it because they don't need it for dinner. Like, that is revolutionary if you think about the human existence on this earth, that we would go play with our dinner and let it go. And there's automatically so many people that will hear that and just be like, those guys are ridiculous. I want nothing to do with them. They're not part of my team. They're not part of my group. Therefore, I don't want to deal with them. Because people, we may be connected by these supercomputers in our pocket, but we're just as tribal as ever. Birds of a feather flock together. You trust people in your little trust circle. These are human things that have let us evolve to this point in existence. We're never going to break this stuff. No words on a website, no live stream like this tonight's ever going to break those human realities. But what I've been fortunate enough to do is actually be taught these types of things by leaders of all sides of the fisheries debate. Through that program I was talking about a moment ago, where I said I get involved in a fisheries management education program. They're actually funded by the feds, funded by the states. There's a program called the Marine Resource Education Program that I've been able to take part in and been able to introduce other stakeholders to. Ken Jeffries is actually one of them. He was able to take part in this multi-day course that was all expenses paid for people in the industry to be educated on fisheries management, because ultimately that's where the rubber hits the road, especially for people in business.
That's when I was watching that live day, that was one of the things that he said. He said he's one of them guys that will sit down, and if you have any kind of ideas, that if all three parties can get together, if all three parties could get together. Hold on one second.
I closed the screen share for a second.
No, you're good.
Oh, you got to put the fancy frame up.
Yeah, everybody needs to know your name, who to yell at, and send good emails to.
I'm easy to find, I
think. But he was saying the exact same thing. He was like, if we all three, not everybody is going to get what they want. All right. Mm-hmm. But if you all can get together and figure something that works, because he said, because I know Robert and Ken are part of this big lawsuit that's going on. Well, I don't know how big it is, but it's a big lawsuit. And they were saying if it wins, even if they win, he said he still don't think that's the right way to go. He thinks that if you all can just get together, he said it's all about management. No matter what happens, they can't manage the fishery right. And he goes, that is one of the big problems. I think he said DNR was, I think it could be a problem with it. I mean, so I was trying to listen to that today and I was actually going to play clips so where we could talk about what he said. Because I know some people had mentioned that, some of it wasn't true. And I don't know if he would obviously say stuff that isn't. I mean, there's some stuff that I was like, but.
Well, and the reason I pulled up the website real quick before I segue again, because I'm the king of that. I'll go in many directions by accident.
You're good.
But ultimately, I brought this up because the words that are bold here: conserve, promote, and enhance. Conserve is something we do with our checking accounts. If you're going to survive, whether it's paycheck to paycheck like most Americans, or you got more, you got less, either way, you have to conserve what you have. And technically, a fishery resource is no different. There's only so many of them. Now, there's a massive government system attempting to count them and understand how many there are and predict how many come into the future. That's what I'm going to talk about next a little bit, that management piece, because I'm going to point people to some information they can read in their spare time. And it's part of actually what got me involved in this stuff, because I have that type of mentality. I grew up in a small family building business. I've been building houses, riding around in the truck with my dad since I could walk, and officially started working for him out of college. I have a mechanical engineering degree, and I worked in the defense sector when I was in college. So building things, putting things together, complex puzzles is how my brain is wired. So as a guy that loves to fish and hunt growing up, I gravitated towards this fisheries management system because I went, this is the place for my voice. And I'll never forget that I met people at C.C.A. through a fishing network, going to a happy hour, meeting some people, going fishing with them, just learning new places, new techniques, that kind of stuff. And I remember it stood out to me. It says right here, the purpose of C.C.A. is to advise and educate the public on the conservation of marine resources. That's the purpose. Advise and educate. And that's a big part of the core piece of the puzzle, because no matter what story it is, there's always these tall tales of these rich people that did this and bought this person off and did that. But the reality is most of our biggest wins are by the public being engaged in the process and the public saying, this is the outcome we want. It doesn't mean it's the perfect outcome, and the management system rarely has the perfect outcome, especially when a resource is moving in the wrong direction population-wise, or management says that the population's moving in the wrong direction, and the industry or the users, the stakeholders, believe the complete opposite. which is something that's not new. We're seeing that in striped bass in these arguments. We're seeing the lawsuit come out, and the chips will fall where they may. I do view all this as kind of pressure testing the system, which is a necessary piece of the puzzle when it comes to fisheries management, which is why, again, advising and educating the public on the conservation of marine resources is our purpose, so that we can empower people to speak on their own behalf. I hear all the time, CCA this, CCA this, CCA that. If it's not in writing on our website, it's probably a rumor. It's probably misinformation. Speaking of a rumor, I mentioned I come from a home building background. There's a rumor out there that I'm a rich developer and I just do this work because I hate Waterman. And it's like, what? What? How about ask maybe I really hate CJ Canby when I buy crabs from him. Maybe right. I hate Billy and Rocky Rice down the Potomac, two absolute gentlemen who are just awesome. Catching blue cats, catching rockfish, catching oysters. They're a tremendous fabric of our industry. And so my point of all that is the bottom line is there's a lot of people out there that just want to throw stones and create this division and paint this broad brush of any group. And frankly, I kind of laugh at it, because when people do that, they're missing out on the opportunity to really engage in a positive way. So y'all ain't talking nothing.
Well, right now, Kyle thinks we're not talking. Kyle thinks we're not talking about anything. I'm going to ask some questions. I think I'm going to get into.
So one guy did say he wants to see some of the fish nerd stuff. I mean, I don't care. I won't share anything. I'll just answer questions.
No.
What do you want, Kyle?
I hear a lot of catches. What's being talked is, in my opinion, that the much bigger problem in hand is the water quality. Well, that was another thing that Ken was talking about.
Keep that up. Keep that up.
Ken had mentioned that it's amazing how, I forgot what oh crap, I forgot what river he said he was in, the Magathy. Mm-hmm. How he had tons of freaking pollution water is actually just being dumped in there. You got the back river, and then we were talking about the Conewinger Dam above it. Mm-hmm. Hold on for a second. I got this is the other day. Okay. What happened?
I'll get rid of my screen.
Hold on. Oh yeah, the other day I just got this. This was Conewinger Dam right there. That's the trash.
Unbelievable.
That's guys. Hold on. Let me take this off real quick. Get back here real quick. This was all behind. This is behind the Conewinger Dam.
Mm-hmm.
And every time it rains, we get a real big giant rain. They got to open all them gates. This is all the stuff that comes down there. I do got to show this because this was very important, and I forgot to mention this. You see this right here, guys? This is Maryland, and right on that flag, right on that thing, right there is your farmer, and right there is your waterman. These two guys are very important. It's very important to Maryland. I think that's that's your Maryland flag right there. I know this is going to get.
Well, and it's actually pretty funny, and you can Google it. The seal originates with Lord Calvert, and Lord Calvert had a colony up in Newfoundland, and the fishing component in the history I've seen actually comes from that Newfoundland colony, and it's part of what they ended up making a migration down here in Maryland, where most of the farming representation was. That said, there's no question there's fishing here, but there's even history there that actually directly relates to overfishing a stock of fish and having to move because of the prevailing conditions. And that's the unfortunate reality of all these fisheries management components that we're trying to manage as people, with massive science systems, with massive government systems. It's never going to totally get it right. And there's always going to be people that are impacted by the resource and the management of it.
So I'm going to read this text and look, like I told you, I'm not here for the get you thing, but.
Well, do you want me to talk about the dam? We pulled the pictures up.
What's that?
You want to talk about the dam? Is that where we are still?
Yeah, the dam.
Yeah, go on. Yeah. I mean, this is embarrassing. This is, as far as I'm concerned, it's a failure of whatever government agencies should be overseeing this in multiple states, and the responsibility of Exelon, the operator of the dam, to my understanding, cleaning it up and meeting these actual standards, because otherwise standards are just on paper, and there's no question about that. And this is only truly the surface, no pun intended, of the problem that exists with this dam. And I know you and I talked about this before. What is the solution? Is it
doesn't matter. Well, I mean, well, I mean, don't they have, I mean, somebody had mentioned something like they do that in the harbor, some kind of machine that would at least kind of, once you
Mhm.
kind of get it somewhat clean, maybe something that could maybe run, so it kind of runs by itself, right?
Yeah.
You kind of let it run in a certain area to kind of maybe keep some of the bigger stuff out. But I mean, where do you put all that stuff, and what is really in there, and how deep is it? And really, when we had that big rain, I mean, not only did it decimate the razor clams right down, around the Chester River area, but it
Mhm.
just, I mean, you had porta potties running down there, dead
Yeah.
animals. I mean, it's really bad, and I just don't. And this has been like this since I was a kid. I
Mhm.
mean, this is every time something happens, and we always talk about when it comes to pollution. I mean, that's one of the main contributors. But then you got all the pretty much human waste being put into from Back River.
Mhm.
There's a couple other places. I think pollution to me was one of the big issues for me.
Ab
I just think that
Yeah.
me and my wife, we eat we eat plenty of crabs during the year. And my friend always says, I can't believe you're eating crab. You're eating anything out of there sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's no question all those plastics and stuff. I mean, we're figuring out that they're everywhere. I mean, they break down into microplastics. They're in our bodies. They're in our seafood. And to just the plastic issue alone, you're right. They have the trash wheels all over Baltimore. A little bit of stuff, or enough stuff, still sneaks out. But to think that a country that can do what we can do
Yeah.
can't figure out how to remove trash off the top of the water above a dam when that dam is generating revenue and the state is making money off of it. The feds are making money off of it. And let's not forget all that. And I often
Oh,
hear it talked about like the Conowingo, if that problem's solved, then everything else doesn't matter. But unfortunately, that's not the reality of what's going on. And I look at the Conowingo as saying, okay, well, I'm glad it's there at this point because at least it did trap all the sediment that is behind it. And I don't know all the details of what the Hogan administration tried to do or did to implement a study on attempting to get rid of material, but it clearly didn't seem to be something that was practical, given our budget or given whatever realities are in place. And so, it's one of these things where at CCA, we don't just wake up in the morning and be like, okay, we're going to work on this issue today. We have extremely limited resources. For many years, I've been the only full-time employee in the state. And so when it comes to getting involved in these really complicated things like Conowingo, we're happy to be involved if it's a practical outcome that can benefit the water quality of the bay, because
you need to
whether it's
hear.
the stuff you can't see or if it's the stuff that you can, it's absolutely impacting the ability of our native critters to reproduce and to thrive. It's a big part of striped bass, what their situation is. Yellow perch, eels, crabs, you name it. I mean, there's so many different resources that are impacted. You mentioned razor clams. I mean,
Right.
being covered up by all this sediment. This sediment should be contained somewhere. Frankly, it never should have come off the fields and such, but the earth is a quickly changing thing. We can only
There's one of them
control.
puppies I was telling you about.
What's up,
I'm waiting.
pup?
Yeah, the other day I'm sitting down here and I was, just doing some stuff on here, actually setting everything back up from the other day, and one of them walked right through and knocked the camera over and everything. So I'm trying
Yeah.
to stop her from going through. I'm sorry about that. Go ahead. It was asked by, she was wondering, what is the fees for maintaining commercial license? Do you have any idea what that would you be used for?
Yeah. Yeah. So in general, and actually, so one of the things I do, I'm on the Sport Fisheries Advisory Commission for Maryland DNR. We meet quarterly, and there's a Tidal Fisheries Advisory Commission as well. So Sport Fish is the recreational side, Tidal Fish is the commercial side. Both have charter boat representation on them. They meet quarterly, and at this April meeting, which will happen in 2 weeks, DNR holds this meeting. It's my understanding that they're going to give out a budget report that will at least be preliminary, and it helps show funding that comes from our state general fund, funding that may come from federal partners for various programs, or license fees, which they call special fund revenue. So a lot of that money goes into the general DNR operating budget, and then they track where it's supposed to go. And under the late portion of the O'Malley administration, they did an analysis of the services that the DNR was completing, and then the stakeholders, who's paying what, and then what services do they require financially in order to kind of balance their budget, which was called cost recovery. So there's actually been an analysis done of that, which was led by an economist and is out there in the internet. I think it's 2013, 14 era. So cost recovery, Maryland DNR. And so that information is actually supposed to be really transparent, and I don't think that it is. And that's a big part of what we do at CCA, is try and make sure that information that's relevant to the stakeholders, whether it be rec or commercial, if you're paying a fee to an agency for that agency to manage your resource, you should expect a certain level of customer service, of follow through, of respect, all those types of things. And that's a big part of what we try and do, is make sure there's transparency so people know where the money comes from, who's doing it, within reason. I mean, there's only so much we can do to shine light on what's going on. And also there's a lot of, I think, opportunity for, let's call it conspiracy theories, when you start going down the government funding route or funding route period. And, there's only so much we can do to attack and get to the bottom of some of these issues, which is frankly what we want to do.
So, all right, let's get into one of the striper things, and one that stood out to me listening to a couple meetings.
Yep.
I think I had mentioned to you this before. So I'm 57 years old. All right. I know I look 30. I know I'm very ruggedly handsome and stuff. Look, even see, the wife agrees. See, after 37 years, I guess that's what she's got to say, right?
Love it.
So what I didn't realize is that when they do the Young of the Year, all right, for stripers, one of the big things that I didn't realize, I'm 57 years old, and when I started watching TV, I had 3 channels. I had 4 channels. Today, I have absolutely unlimited, whatever it is I feel like watching that day, I can find somewhere. I can find somewhere to watch whatever it is I want to watch, because I can watch TV and flip through 1,000 channels and not find crap on TV, right?
Yep.
So since the 1950s, DNR has done the crab survey, has done the Year of the Young survey, basically in the same rivers, the same way. Basically the same way. And I heard there's some people out there saying, look, there is plenty of rockfish. They need to move some of them surveys into different areas, because the impact that the blue cats are having, maybe up near the Susquehanna River. I will show you, I'm very, very proud of this fish, and David Confair is the man, because he's the reason I got it. He's the reason I caught that one. That's David standing right behind me. I went with him. I keep trying to get him to go. See, he just got mad. I caught a bigger fish in that day, and he hasn't taken me back since. He best go back. But that's in a river. And what David's told me is that if you go into a river, and wait a minute, there's a video I'm going to play. Here is the Marshy Hope. Okay. Look at that catfish there. That is that's almost 6 feet layered of catfish underneath those right now. Holy. So what he said that was very disturbing is that if you go in there and you get a school of fish, it could be 10 pounders. And then they usually school together. So it's either going to be a school of 5 to 10 pounders, or you're going to have a school of 20 to 30 pounders. Could you imagine a school of 20, 30 pounders sitting up there on the Susquehanna River when all them stripers are coming up? Do you think eventually fish would be wise to maybe go somewhere else and maybe go up into a river? I think the fish would do some different stuff to actually, to help, everybody survives their way. They learn how to survive. So do you think, so why is it still done the same way all these years?
So what this study does is not just for striped bass, it's for lots of species.
Crabs too.
Yeah, it's standardized. Well, this one, in this case, they do count crabs if they catch them in the seine net, but I don't think it's specific. I think it's in general for fin fish. I've done it. There's actually, let me show you. I can actually show you the DNR site. Let me see here. That'll give people an idea of what we're talking about here. So the juvenile striped bass survey discusses this young of year. This is what DNR is looking for. These are young of year striped bass. They're small. If I remember correctly, it's somewhere around 100 millimeters that they find like an age break or something like that. But ultimately, they measure the fish, they record it. They take a scale sample and they age the scales, because the scales will have lines just like the rings on a tree. And they have this massive database of these samples. how many fish they encounter per sweep of the net, which is, there's a video here that can better describe it. I mean, I'll put the link here in the chat, but this is the net being swept across an area. It's a 4-foot tall net. It's a certain distance. They sweep it, they count the fish. This is a specifically structured survey that is designed by experts in fisheries, statistics, and science. The reason they've been doing it the same way for a very long time is that's very important as it relates to being used in a coastwide stock assessment for striped bass. And so the massive scientific document that combines, I think, if I'm not mistaken, over 2,500 different data sets, brings it together to understand the population of striped bass in the population for the entire coast. And so it's not to say that what they get in the Young of Year survey directly relates to the overall population. It's one input of an understanding of what's out there. It does not directly impact the management. What ends up happening is if Young of Year surveys show a below average catch over a multi-year period, then the ASMFC management plan requires that reductions are considered, or it has to consider all the other things going on. But ultimately, we have to be more conservative when they're catching less fish in this survey. But I know I've heard it said that's the survey that directly defines the limits and how many fish they think are out there, and there couldn't be anything further from the truth. What's important to recognize when it comes to striped bass, this is a ton of information, but I encourage people to look at the pictures and try and learn them. Take some time to look at these. And I want to get to Rachel's point because she's right. I want to get on to what we should do moving forward. But the entire coastwide stock assessment and fisheries management plan can be found right here at the ASMFC website. This, whether we like it or not, whether it's accurate, whether it's not accurate, whether it's right, whether it's wrong, it is the prevailing management system that the states from Maine to North Carolina, including Pennsylvania, are part of to manage migratory striped bass. And so I encourage people to get involved in this stuff, and I do these because of that, advise and educate people. I'm not telling you what you need to think, how you need to feel. I'm telling you where the actual information is that's used for management, because the most effective use of any advocate, whether they're commercial, recreational, I don't care who you are, you may not like fishing. Go to the place where the fish are managed if you want to be effective, which sure as heck isn't Facebook. So that's advocacy tip number 1 of the night. This is a lot of information on the striped bass. What I like to look at are these reviews of the fishing year. These are the actual data used, and this actually starts off with a status of the fisheries management plan and all the different changes that have been made. And then it goes through all this different information. There's also a stock assessment update that has tables like this. This seems overwhelming and confusing, but what this is the underlying numbers of fish that they estimate are out there in the population based on the models that are happening. And in this case, this one is estimates of exploitable biomass of fish. So again, whether we like it or not, this is what is fueling our assumptions about what is out there, not just the Young of Year. When it comes to the Young of Year and what should be done now, like why can't they count in other places? Why can't they go looking for fish? Again, this survey is supporting the management system and has been for a very long time. If you remove it, you can't just quickly replace it with other information. You need a long-standing series of data that the scientists have reviewed. And then if it's accepted for use in a stock assessment, in the big mathematical science work that's done to manage the resource, if it's accepted, it has to also be peer reviewed. And that's these very stringent science systems that, again, like it or not, they exist. And it's really important for people to try and participate and follow along with these if they have the interest or the ability. And frankly, again, that's a big part of why CCA was founded, so that we could represent our interest, that of a healthy and abundant resource for anglers' access to it in this management system. So ultimately, the Young of Year stuff, we testified on a House bill that was entered this year that said that DNR shall do additional Young of Year surveys in the middle portion of the bay, because there's this idea that we collectively, the community, the public, is seeing a lot more fish in the middle bay, and they feel like
you can see it on Facebook. you can see that ever since December, and everybody keeps saying how, some guys saying that, hey, we might be close to a moratorium, and then there's some guys, there's plenty of fish out there. There's plenty.
Yeah. So
I had a very, 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 it wasn't a heated discussion. I talked to you about this gentleman. We won't name no names, but man, he was kind of laying it. I wouldn't say he was laying into me, but he was so passionate about it, and he said he's glad that I did kind of got it off his chest. You know, if I don't keep up with comments, I'm sorry, guys. I'm gonna.
No, no problem.
I'm trying to listen to you and then try to. And you know what I'm doing.
And I'm not skipping the comments. I'm trying to weave in what I'm reading really quickly on some things. So this is some stuff I talked about with Lenny Rudo on Live with Lenny recently a little bit, and this is a saying. And if you notice that I don't have the right other map up, but there's one out there of the spawning areas. And the reason that these dots are where they are is because these are known spawning rivers that produce over history lots of striped bass. And so you have the Nanticoke, you have the Chop Tank, you have the Pax, you have the Potomac, you've got the Upper Bay. And the Upper Bay spawning reaches are largely Aberdeen Proving Grounds area. The southern border of the flats where they used to let us fish, there down towards Pools Island is the spawning area. Yes, spawning does happen in the main stem of the Susquehanna below the dam. It will happen out on the flats. But these are generally areas that fish are going to be hanging around in the spring, and then they're going to ultimately have their eggs there. Females release the eggs. The males have the sperm, of course. That meets in the water column. And a striped bass, yeah, a striped bass is, I think I testified in front of the legislature talking about that as well. But ultimately, the striped bass larvae actually float throughout the water column for a certain period of time. And so that is the condition they need to survive, to then hatch out of their little shell and become that free swimming little larva. And then ultimately they need the phytoplankton and things they eat at that young age. They need temperature to exist in a certain period for them to survive that period. And of course, then it's good luck. The strong survive out there in the wild. So the vast
I think it was good. He was saying with the climate change and all this stuff, the warmer waters and everything, maybe they're going maybe a little deeper to keep in some cooler water and stuff too.
Yeah, there's absolutely no question about that. I know that DNR, they've put out their spring surveys, which are more about the spawning fish, not the baby fish. The young of year stuff starts in the summertime because that's the time at which the young fish have had enough time to grow. And that was that like 100 centimeter limit, I think. That's why, they get them really small. They're a couple months old. But the spawning stock survey they do in the spring, it's a gillnet survey. They're doing that right now, and they actually started it a couple weeks early so that they could tell if they could interact with ready to spawn fish in March. But historically, the fish don't spawn until April for the most part, and they're just about done spawning by mid-May. But it's all driven by temperature, by salinity, by turbidity, how much stuff's in the water column, how quickly the water's flowing, because by natural design, that's how striped bass spawn. So striped bass can be spawning, and the larvae can drift all throughout the Chesapeake Bay, so that there are young striped bass everywhere. But to find a young striped bass, let's say off Ken Island, does not mean that they're spawning at, I don't know, one of the spots right there. They're not spawning at the Bay Bridge, because in the end, no matter what, we can't make striped bass spawn effectively in a water condition, in a water habitat where they're not able to spawn. And after talking about this on a previous live stream like this, I actually had a DNR guy that does this work say, thank you, you're right. And it's the same reason that, if you dam a salmon river, the salmon are going to keep coming until they're gone. You remove the dam, the salmon are gone. These fish do have what they do reliably return to the rivers where they were born. And so basically the populations that is out there has come from the rivers where these surveys are done. If we want to set up surveys in other places, we have to start from scratch and say, what are we trying to answer? Are we trying to understand young fish? Are we trying to understand medium age fish? Are they legal? Are they not legal? And in fisheries management, the young of year survey is something called a fishery independent survey. So it's not using a gear that would be used in an actual fishery. A fishery dependent survey is something that the DNR does with pound net surveys, with creel surveys. They're actually connecting with people that are actively fishing to grab information from that activity. That information also fuels the estimates about population, which fuels the coastwide understanding of the population, and then how many we can take. So there's all these millions of inputs. And I'm not saying all this stuff to make it confusing. I'm saying all this stuff because it is that complicated. And these fishery stock assessments are done, and in the end, the reports they write are hundreds of pages long.
Yeah, I'm just getting a text saying that in Virginia, they're catching spawned out bass in early March in Virginia.
Yep. Well, and what's
I'm getting text. I'm trying to keep up with, I'm trying to keep up with this and do the text. So I am listening, but I hope I can get everything.
Hey, you get really bored riding around, you can
Yeah.
listen to it again on the way to work.
It'll be up. Having spawning areas change like north because of the climate change. Okay. There's Stephen Camboris. I'm sure he's got one. Current catches of mature fish aren't an indicator of sustainability in the stock. It's an indicator of good breeding, recruitment years in the past. The recent year of the young surveys, y'all get me getting to read too much. I don't like doing this shit. Surveys are what is showing unsustainable in the stock because they aren't producing enough young to replace the adults we have now. Why that is can certainly be a debate. All right, we'll debate it.
Yeah, 100%. And this is the young of year, the survey we're talking about that some people say, well, why are they doing it the same way? Again, if they abandon this, Maryland is now for the coastwide management of striped bass would not have any data stream estimating the population of young fish going into the system. And so the system would be missing an important data input. Also, Maryland and the Chesapeake Bay are so important because historically 70 to 90% of striped bass that are born into the population are estimated to come from the Chesapeake. And if you just zoom out and look at our estuary and look at our marshes and our river systems and the diversity of it, I mean, you could have rainfall in the Shenandoah Valley, that can affect the Potomac. A little bit further south, it's going to affect the James, the Rappahannock, these other places. And so thankfully, striped bass spawn in many of these rivers because if the Nanticoke does really good one year, that could actually lead to one of these purple lines being way higher than not. And it's actually been told to me by many people in DNR that the chop tank has always been the biggest driver in the ultimate outcome that we see over time, whether it be a big spike in population or the population not being what it should be.
Yeah, we're definitely. So electronic reporting is really for gathering information so that the decisions can be made of when to shut the fishery down or change its limits. That's what Rachel said.
Yes, and ... would be or increase access to a fishery or increase the limits. But in history, that hasn't happened very often. That's an unfortunate reality that I think weighs heavily on the commercial industry in our country. I mentioned that shift from 77% seafood consumed in this country being domestic versus today 91% being imported, and that's just sad. I mean, we talk about a really conflict-driven fishery, just from a national stability and economic stability and ecosystem stability standpoint. We have one of the biggest conflicts in fisheries right in our backyard with omega protein taking up to 51,000 metric tons of menhaden out of Virginia waters in the Chesapeake Bay. That's 125 million pounds. Mm-hmm. That's about 250 million menhaden if they're about a half pound a piece. Think about that, 250 million individual fish that are feeding all the other fish that we need, that are feeding crabs, that are feeding this ecosystem, are being taken out. Well, that company can legally do that. And the management system is what allows it. And the sovereignty of the state of Virginia or the Commonwealth of Virginia is what allows it. That is a fact. It's not my opinion. Unfortunately, the company that owns the harvest which occurs in the Chesapeake can actually export that menhaden as food for farm-raised salmon that they feed and then import back to the U.S., selling it back to the U.S. because you can't go anywhere without finding a farm-raised salmon everywhere. In fact, if I'm in the commercial fishing industry in the United States, that's my number one enemy, the farm salmon world, because guess what? It's cheaper, it's available. And if we think about it from a national trade perspective, we're operating at an economic deficit. We're shipping something out that is massive yield, high yield, 51,000 metric tons. They grind it down into fish meal to feed salmon so we can buy it back and pay for a Canadian, Chilean, Mexican, North Atlantic, wherever it might be, person. And I mean, that's a history that you're a Dundalk boy, about jobs being shipped out overseas. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
That is the reality of
the work. Ain't no Bethel Steel no more.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's no Procter.
It looks that way. What is the benefit now for the FACTS program?
So I believe that the FACTS program is, so the FACTS program was built for commercial fishing, and it was, I believe, first implemented for the blue crab fishery. The use of it in the charter business was used as a way to incentivize the charter business doing electronic reporting. Therefore, DNR could get more timely reporting. They think in some cases more accurate, but accuracy is up to the person putting it in there. And I've heard plenty of captains say they don't accurately report all the information.
I mean, that's what Ken was saying, that at least well, I think that he was saying more that the full-time guys will do it, where you got a lot of part-timers that maybe not do it. But he was saying with all, at least they have some kind of data for his stripers caught, so you can go by his data, and his data, the percentage that they're catching doesn't make any sense why they got cut 50% of their stuff, where recreational, they went into a program, I guess 8 years ago, but we don't got no program where, we can sit there all day long and catch fish. And if we did get to keep one, if 4 or 5 people, if you guys don't know what we're bringing out here, how can the data, I guess the commercial guys are saying, well, why are you taking from us if you don't even know what the recreational guys are catching? But even though we giving you data and the data says we're not really having an impact, why can't we, still keep the 2 fish? But I mean, that's one of the questions. Or why did they get cut their 50% of their thing?
Yeah. So ultimately, one of the terms I say a lot is it's all relative, because it is truly relative to your position, your perspective, your spot in the world when it comes to this battleground. I'll call it that, because that's what it is. And ultimately, there's a lot of confusion about data. And there's this idea that it's recreational versus now charter versus commercial. And I'm sitting here going, well, hold on, which one do I fit in? Because I fished on a charter boat last week. I ate seafood the other day. I have oysters in my fridge right now that were caught in, I think it's bar number 043 in Fishing Bay. Got them from Whitman Wharf Seafood. Thank you, Nick. I'm going to be eating some oysters right at the end of the season here. So where do I fit? I'm a client of a commercial. I'm a client of a charter boat. I clearly don't have those businesses, but I'm also just the general public. And so what we're talking about is truly the base definition of politics. Who gets what? Who gets to allocate what, right? So there's been this new conversation around data. And as if, because you've collected your data for a 3-year period, all of a sudden your catch is bestowed upon you because you reported into an electronic app that you caught that. Tracking information of who catches what, or what for hire boats or a charter boat catches, logbooks are nothing new. The only thing gained when they put it into FACTS was made it less administratively burdensome for DNR. They caught it more quickly, but it's still just the exact same data coming through in a different portal. And if we wanted to go into this massive statistical nerd discussion, we could talk about data and its bias. And one really valuable thing, I'll just touch on that a tiny bit. One really valuable thing is to understand what's called recall bias. And so one of the most valuable things in electronically reported information is if the person is being honest and they're doing their best to accurately report their catch, the most likely point that it's going to be accurate is that day. And so with FACTS requiring you to say my trip has ended and here's my catch, here's my releases, this is my data, managers and the statistical programmers and such, like the technical and science world, can more confidently say that information is more accurate than if we would ask you in a month or so, because you're catching up on your late reports. So there's this whole, it truly is a whole world of science and statistics that manage some of this stuff. And I've probably been, I think, one of the biggest champions of better data collection across the recreational fishery writ large, both in my involvement at C.C.A. as a volunteer and as executive director the last 7 years. That's why I've run all our fishing tournaments with electronic apps to gain that kind of information, because ultimately the information you can capture from the average recreational angler fits into the puzzle in some ways, and it's a survey. And so you're just randomly selecting people, a survey. The information that comes in a commercial fishery is like a census. And that means you're going to every single catch you want to catch, count every fish, every single thing. That's 2 completely different worlds of statistical design that can get you 2 completely different outcomes. So it's apples and oranges. And so when people say, oh, rec data versus charter data versus commercial data, they're having the wrong conversation, frankly, in my opinion. It's not apples to apples. Speaking of trying to collect better data, I've been asking DNR for years and then leading by example, collection of data for things like what did you catch, how many, and did you release them, and how long are they? That's information that can all go through Maryland DNR's volunteer reporting system, something that we've promoted at CCA, and I've helped try and encourage DNR to allocate money to promote, because I know how valuable accurate data is. And I want to show you something that led to a lot of the complexity with rockfish right now. Really just, it took off in 2018, 2019, 2020. It took off when FACS was given as a tool to allow something like 377 for-hire captains, charter boat guys, to have an extra limit, 2 fish, not reduce that limit if they report electronically. But reporting electronically doesn't magically change anything in management. It was simply a political gift to say your business is to have these fish. Well, unfortunately, that came on the tails of a brand new perspective of who's catching what as a ratio. For many, many years in Maryland, many years since the moratorium, the goal has always been that there's 42.5% of the available catch, 42.5% is commercial, and 58.5% or 57.5% is recreational. That was the agreed upon allocation that happened for a very long time. That allocation got wiped out the door when the ITQ fishery started happening. It also got wiped out when the ASMFC decided to manage fisheries a little bit different. I'm not even going to go into it. But we used to have this goal. Well, in 2018, this is what happened. So looking at data through 2017, forget the red line for a minute. Forget this top line. And this is all MRIP data and actual data from the fisheries management system. This is the data. There's a good answer to that question. Where is the recreational data? It's called MRIP, and this is it. And so the information...
There is no recreational data.
Yeah, there is. There's a massive system of people. Huh?
That's what the question, where is the recreational data?
Well, yeah, I know. Yeah, the answer is it's on the screen. So what ended up happening was MRIP, the system that captures all this information, that what it's doing is it's saying how many people are out there fishing. What's the number of people out there? What are you catching? And this is work done at like Sandy Point. There's people with a clipboard. And again, like it or not, this is it. They go out there, they interview the angler. It's an intercept. It's a survey. And they answer the questions. They ask them, how long were you fishing? What did you catch? What did you release? And then that information goes into the database. They also try and estimate your effort. And they realized, given the technology changes that have occurred recently, their old system was based on a household telephone system. So if we'd be sitting around, we live on the coast, my wall phone could ring right now. Hello, this is from the Marine Recreational Information Program. We'd like to ask you about your fishing activity. They're going to ask me how many times I fished and all these series of questions. What their goal was to understand how many times I went fishing, effort. How many times? Was it 1 day? Was it 20 days? And from the people they sample, they try and estimate a general understanding of what's happening out there. Unfortunately, if they take your catch and your effort, so what you're catching based on the surveys and what your effort is based on the surveys, how many days you're doing it, they say, okay, well, there's a catch per unit of effort. That's the mathematical piece. And then they go, all right, well, if there's one David, one Sam, but there's 9 million people catching striped bass, we better multiply this up and go, okay, it's kind of practical that if they caught 2 million fish spending this many days, then the population might be, 10 million fish. And it's not that simple, but that's about as simple as I can describe the reality of how catch and effort of recreational surveys drive our population understandings. And what's showing on the screen right now, before the 2020 management system kicked in. So this is 2018 data. This is from what's called a benchmark stock assessment. They brought in new assumptions about MRIP data. The old rec line was the blue line right here. The commercial, the purplish line, which is right here, is the commercial quota based on average weight. This is numbers of fish. So it's the commercial quota divided by average numbers of weight equals poundage. I'm sorry, numbers of fish. numbers of fish. The actual quota is right here. I'm sorry. Quota, darker line, purple. Numbers landed, the green line. And you can see back in history, there was some difference. Right here in recent history, this is because the ITQ system has allowed them to track the tags, the catch, the overall commercial harvest directly to the quota and do a good job of doing that. It's rarely gone above and beyond or above and below in recent history. This blue line is recreational catch. And there's no 58-42 here. The goal was always 58-42, but we had the complete wrong tools to even try and manage the system like that at this point. Well, magically in 2018, when they decided to reassess the striped bass population, they went from recreational being this blue line to recreational being this big reddish purple line. So all of a sudden they went, at least in Maryland, we always understood it to be try and managed about 60-40, 57.5, 42.5. That was the Maryland goal. All of a sudden we started talking about coastwide 90%, 10%. Oh, commercial doesn't matter. Oh, it's only recreational. Oh, the data's bad. That's all you hear. Mm-hmm. And the truth of the matter is we're all being negatively impacted by this confusion around recreational fisheries data. This idea that you can just flip the switch and all of a sudden it's that different. We're not accounting for our catch well at all. CCA as an organization has always tried to invest in the states better capturing data from their users. The state doing it. There is legislation that hopefully the governor signs in a week or two that now gives DNR the legal authority to capture data from anyone they give the authority of a license to, whether you're rec, commercial, you name it. That is, it's flying under the radar right now. That is huge. That is huge because now DNR, who we pay, and I think should be managing our resource better, can better capture our data in Maryland. They should set everyone up with electronic reporting if that will give us a better outcome. But
that's kind of what we do with when we're hunting. Whenever we kill a deer, whenever we kill a sick deer, whenever you kill a turkey, whenever you kill anything, you gotta report it.
Yep.
Now, when you're sitting there and you're catching 300 fish, you have a 30, 40 fish day that day, whether it be, well, I guess striped bass. I mean, if you got there and you're catch a whole day, I mean, it's all depends on how truthful somebody's going to be too.
It does. And unfortunately, what's happening right now, I've been saying this for years, that chart I had up, that this is not accurate. My dear friend, Captain Monty Hawkins down in Ocean City, he's a champion pushing back against MRIP and its nonsense and has been for a very long time because MRIP is a system that statistically coastwide year long across the entire fishery, it's reasonably precise. And I say that word specifically, precise. That means there's a level of precision. All the data is relatively close to it, the other data. Like the outcomes are pretty similar, so that therefore they're believable. Well, it's just not accurate either. But anyway, the precision is better on a year-wide, coast-wide scale. When you start using MRIP data to make a 1-week decision here, a 2-week decision here, 1-inch size here, one group gets this, one group gets that. It's what Ken Jeffries calls using Band-Aids. And it's BS. It shouldn't be how we manage a fishery, which goes right back to why CCA for years has said, capture better data for us so you can better manage this resource and better balance everybody's use of it. And we've never gotten
a big outcome. That was a big outcome from Jeffries. Talking to him, it was like, from the beginning, he was just like, it's the management of the fishery. It's not so much because he said he ain't against the recreational guys, and the recreational guys think it's the commercial guys, and commercial guys, but sometimes say it's the recreational guys. But it's just, man, if there was some way, just some way to come up with something that you might not like it a little bit, but if it helps the fishery in the end. I think that, some people are just going to have to give up stuff. That's the way I look at it. I mean,
I like that. The fishery, hold on, I'm putting this one back. The fishery should be for all groups, but get your data correct before you come up with your biased ideas. So It's not my data. It's not your data because it's not your fish and it's not my fish. And that's an important thing to start with. It's the public's fish. So who should get the data collection right is the government. And fishing isn't this amazingly impactful thing. They just need to understand exactly what we're doing. Well, not exactly, because they'll never figure it out. If we think that, so talk about deer, right? I'm a longtime deer hunter. You talk to any single deer hunter and you hook them up to a lie detector and ask them the question: have you checked and tagged every single deer you've ever caught? How many, Sam, of your guys that deer hunt, how many people you think would have every single time guaranteed checked their deer in 100% by the book?
I think everybody that I know does.
You think every single deer?
They wouldn't lie to me. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Just kidding. Just joking with you.
I love it. But that's the thing.
My wife tells me that we would starve to death if she relied on me to go hunting.
That's true. I barely hunt anymore. I got one deer last year. Well, my point is, that is an actual bias, right? Bias isn't just like, oh, well, don't judge me because you don't have your own house right. Bias is a statistical thing. And if I recall my activity wrong, I'm giving biased information into the data system. If I forget to check my animal, I'm violating a regulation, but I'm actually skewing the data. I'm biasing the data. And so this stuff's really important. And Joe, you just hit on an extremely important point. People that fish on private piers, which in 11,680 some thousand miles that we have in the Chesapeake, I think it's 11,686. We barely have any public access points, if you want to think of it on that scale, right?
Yeah.
11,686 miles. Well, MRIP, the people with the clipboard that go down to Sandy Point, go down to a public access point, that's the only place they're allowed to actually interview you. If you're on a private dock, they can't come interview you. The only hope that you're going to get interviewed is in that where they used to call your telephone, now they mail you the survey. So that's the only hope they're going to get you. This is all why I worked with Delegate Jay Jacobs and I can't remember who else. I think it was Senator, gosh, I can see his face. I can't think of his name. Senator Jack Bailey to introduce legislation in 2022 that created a task force on recreational data collection. Because after a decade of asking DNR to invest in a program, to survey people, to require reporting of what is caught by some recreational anglers, they've failed to do it. And so we passed legislation because we looked at the existing laws and the existing outcomes. And we said, look, DNR, you need to put together a group of stakeholders to figure out a plan and then implement that plan based on budget priorities. And I just put it in the comments where you can find that report. That was a report that actually I think Captain Newberry supported and was a big fan of. That report that report was completed December 1st, 2022. DNR was supposed to reply and explain to the legislature by December 1st, 2023, what they were going to do. And we still have not had the official unveiling of their plans, but that may happen in the coming year or the coming meetings as well that I mentioned earlier, the Sport Fish Advisory Commission meeting. So the point is, we're literally rolling it out there going, all right, here's the license revenue that we pay as anglers or we pay as commercial people. Here's what you need to get done. And in the end, DNR just doesn't have enough people. And that's a fact. So all these ideas about like tag every fish, count every fish, do all this stuff is actually functionally impossible for them to execute. So my point is, I'm not saying anybody's wrong to think we should do something different. My point is, show up at the right meeting, get involved, and get ready to jump into this marathon, which is fisheries management, because that's what I do. That's what CCA was built on, to be engaged in this process and represent, efforts to conserve, promote, and enhance, efforts that will ensure the health and conservation of our marine resources and anglers' access to them. And our purpose is to advise and educate people on the conservation of marine resources in this whole process. So what I'm saying is there's no point of getting information reports from recreational because they probably won't be honest, yet commercial women have to. No. So no matter who the person is, there's a potential for dishonesty. And we've seen it in various evolutions in fisheries. I mean, people lie all the time. Look at those idiots sticking lead weights in their walleyes or whatever that was, that one tournament. People lie all the time. And what I've experienced in my life, it's been interesting to see transitions. Like there was a big transition in the menhaden fishery where for years our menhaden fishermen were not reporting all their catch, probably because of the IRS there's obviously in that kind of fishery, there's a lot of cash. You can hide your catch from the powers that be. But ultimately, when it came down to it, the catch history that the management system was using was well under the actual catch history that these fishermen were relying on. And even if they were being totally honest, I don't know if they were. But the bottom line was the data actually undercut their ability to say, well, whoa, I had like 10 million pounds, not 5 million pounds. And so inaccurate data can really squeak its way out of the management system, or trying to scam the system can really get you in the end. And so I always encourage the people, it's kind of like the speed limit. Most of us are going to follow it, or at least be that speed that everybody's driving together. It's that guy bobbing, weaving, being a jerk that's going to screw it up for the rest of us. And that's just society. So the point is, in a recreational management system, if it was just a recreational fishery, you're going to use a survey. You're going to randomly sample people. The system we're using now is not cutting it, never has been cutting it, even has more uncertainty related to it now than ever. And there's been many of us in the recreational fishery for a very long time saying, get this thing right, because it's so important to invest in better data for us. I love that. I'm going to mention something related to David right here, because I love that point. The bottom line is, across our country, we don't have the funding and the infrastructure so far to try and count every fish that a recreational angler catches. So technically what we need is better systems that randomly select and directly meet people where they are, so we can understand what the catch is. And only from that can we get better accountability, because you're right. We need better accountability. And that's exactly why we wrote that report that says, DNR, this shouldn't be that hard. These are your customers. But they're right, 100% right, that they don't have the resources, nor do the feds. This is all part of the NOAA budget, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. And MRIP is like a pitiful little piece of that budget. And National Marine Fisheries, or NOAA Fisheries, is a pitiful piece of that budget too, which some people actually like. Some people like NOAA's inability to do everything. But anyway, David, your point. You're out there on the water. You can't make it to these meetings because you're trying to put your food on the table. You're 100% right. Just like people that recreationally fish or invest in the opportunity to go fishing can't be in these meetings. That's why CCA exists. And yes, I do represent recreational anglers. I think the commercial fishery needs to do a much, much better job of showing up and speaking on behalf of their particular interest as individuals. I recognize how difficult that is, but I know watermen that are not represented by the current leaders, by the way the current leaders approach fisheries policy, fisheries advocacy. I know tons of recreational fishermen that don't agree with me. And so the only way to fix that is for more people to show up, or to organize and simply have people represent them. But what ends up happening, again, is it's the tribalism. You see a guy with a fly rod on the river and you like to fly fish, you have something in common. You see a guy with numbers on his truck in the gas station, you're going to know him. He's your commercial buddy. We all are like that. And so, again, it's not one group versus the other, but I would encourage more and more people to come to the conversation to hold DNR accountable and stop focusing so much on one group versus the other. Focus on the issue. That's where it happens.
There's Rachel right there saying you can get a meeting. There's a Waterman Association in every county. Yes,
but just like if I went to my meetings of anyone I could organize and I told them information that I just heard, that's stuff that's just trading among this idea amongst people that are like-minded and always going to agree. And unfortunately, I've seen that this does not properly represent watermen writ large across our bay. And I think our watermen are underrepresented in Annapolis, and it's not because of CBA. It's not because of CBA. They won't stick together.
I've heard it enough. I've heard it enough from Robert, even Newberry, Rachel. They said that the watermen will not come together. They won't. It ain't like the farmers or other ones. They just, for some reason, they will not come together. And I guess it makes it harder for that little group going in there every time fighting for certain things. We haven't even got into catfish yet. We haven't even got into oysters yet. Oh my goodness gracious!
I've been talking about stuff. I told you I could rant. You better watch out.
No, I'm good. It's good because that way I ain't got to think of shit up to say.
Yeah.
No, but but you guys are having. Can you explain the program? We're going to look. The striper thing is
complicated
when it comes to, right now. When it comes to the commercial things, I understand where he was coming from. I don't know what he was wrong in. I know he was wrong. There were some things that I don't think that if I'm going to catch my striper, I'm definitely not passing it around the boat for anybody else to take the picture with it, stuff like that. I mean, I know there's a lot of mishandling, but I think with everything from Fish Talk, there's a lot of, I should have brought that video up, But there's a lot of talk about making sure keeping the striper safe, you know, don't be holding it up. Don't be trying to do all kind of crazy stuff with it to make sure you release it safely.
Yeah.
But so that's the striper thing. We got through that pretty cool, pretty great. Is there anything else you want to finish up on that? Because I don't want to, because we've already been on here an hour and 20.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I ain't got nothing to do. It's I'm off tomorrow, so I'm up. But
I'm at a
we got a
Fisheries
pretty
workshop all day tomorrow, so I'll just be doing more of this tomorrow. It's what I do around the clock. I'm happy to stick around. But no, my last point on rockfish. Obviously, there's the lawsuit out there, and I think that, like I said earlier, a system needs to, a pressure needs to be applied. I've said it before. Diamonds come from coal under pressure, and hey, we'll see what happens on the lawsuit front. And the management system will react accordingly. We're a nation of laws, and it's complicated. And so I'll leave it at that. The Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, which I'm honored to serve on, does have Robert T. Brown, the president of the Waterman, sitting at the table. It also has Mike Louisi for Maryland DNR when it comes to striped bass. And we're supposed to hear from you. I didn't hear from a single commercial guy that I even knew, or that I did not know, leading up to this most recent striped bass stuff. I rarely heard from charter boat captains. I heard from a lot of people, which you may classify as guides. But I'm here to hear from all of you. I represent, as a legislative representative, all of you at the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. So what's going to happen this year is the system is going to reassess the population. It's called an assessment update. That's a scientific model. Think of that like those hurricane tracks coming up the coast, right? That's a model, and it's going, I think that hurricane's going to go up that way. And it's based on all this information that NOAA has, right? Fish is the same way. They're trying to project where it's going. They're also looking backwards and going, all right, where do we think we are because of what just happened? That's going to be reported to the ASMFC this October. And throughout this year, they're going to be calculating that information. And no matter what anybody thinks, that information is going to be presented to the board of the striped bass board. And that striped bass board is going to determine what happens next. And that's people like me that represent states from Maine to North Carolina, plus the Potomac River, plus DC, plus Pennsylvania, plus Fish and Wildlife, plus NOAA Fisheries. That's who sits around the table. That's not going to change. I think that because of what we're seeing in the young of year, because of what's happening in other rivers, that we're going to see a challenge with recruitment continue. I hope that 2023 or 4 is the year that changes. I hope this big rain we just had is actually good for the rockfish spawn, but I just don't know. We're going to find that out later this year.
Sick of the rain.
Right? Well, it's actually good for rockfish spawning. I just don't know if this particular time and temperature and everything else is, but we'll find out soon. Anyway, bottom line is October, we'll find out young a year. We'll find out a stock assessment. That will likely change regulations for 2025. Period. And I'm sick and tired of hearing it's rec versus commercial. It's whatever versus whatever. Guess what? If you take a pie, right? And Sam, your piece is 10% of that pie. And then you shrink that pie. Your piece is still 10%. The size of that piece is smaller, but the size of, let's say, my 90% is also smaller.
Right.
And if you took the underlying numbers, they're relatively the same, right? Because that's how percentages work. Maryland DNR and Mike Louisi, Bill Anderson, the last administration, completely flipped how you manage fisheries on their head when they decided that some people get 2 fish, some people don't get cuts, and then rec anglers do get cuts because of this idea that they're the problem because they're 90%. That's just not how it works. The pie should have been shrunk. Everybody's piece or everybody's slice of the pizza should have been smaller relative to each other. Instead, they just shook it all up and decided that they were going to rely upon the future of striped bass in the Chesapeake, at least in the short term, on this idea that the rec fishery is the problem. Well, it's about bay-wide. The rec fishery takes, I think, about 60-something% right now. And so I think it's 65%. Commercial's 35%. Well, all that matters, and all that is what drives fishing mortality in striped bass. And that's the last thing I'll say on striped bass is that we all have an impact. We all need good data. And we all need to focus on holding DNR accountable to the outcomes we need. And guess what? There's not one positive outcome for recreational fishermen. I know that, representing them. And there's not one positive outcome for all the watermen. My goal is that our state can maintain full-time, well-paid watermen that can fuel the economy in the working waterfronts that have traditionally fueled economy in our state. because to lose that would be a problem. And if one group of people is attacking recreational anglers as if we're the problem, that's a problem too. And guess what? In the meantime, the future of hardworking, well-meaning watermen is actually being undermined. So that's what I mean by saying that you need better representation that has the long view, that can truly work with leaders at DNR, avoid the politics, and get involved in the nitty-gritty and hold DNR accountable to helping reach the outcome you need. If you're a big quota holder, you should be defending your turf. You should be fighting DNR. You should be suing to defend your turf as a business. And I keep saying it's my last comment on straight bass, but the bottom line is stand up, be counted, get involved, no matter who you are and what group you think you're part of. Because if not, other people are making the decisions for you. It's that simple.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say you're having a big thing with catfish, snakeheads, and why don't you go ahead and explain all that?
Yeah, so this is actually part of the data collection stuff I mentioned a little bit before, being the champion of rec data collection. This is we started in 2020 as a way to engage people that could go out fishing once we figured out the whole COVID thing and how we can get around and get out there and enjoy ourselves. So we created this data collection opportunity that year. This was not sponsored in year one. CCA just did it. I sat here in my basement and set it up so that we could capture data about what people are catching, whether it's a snakehead, a blue catfish, or a flathead catfish. And so we created the Great Chesapeake Invasives Count. This is the current website we just opened yesterday. Folks can come on here. I put the link in the chat, and it's right here. Look at this. I think I put it in here. There it is. ccamd.org/count. That takes you to the Great Chesapeake Invasives Count. So this is what we're trying to celebrate. People out there catching fish, having a good time. This is actually from an event down in Sharpstown where we caught a bunch of fish. We've done events over the last couple of years under the Invasives Count umbrella, which is all about promoting people's access to these fisheries and trying to take advantage of them. Also just being aware that they are impactful on the native resource. Of course, there's a debate around invasive fish. Should these people have to kill a fish or release a fish? And, I've said time and time again, I believe that we should be harvesting these fish. We should be making money off of them. But I can't force one of these people in these pictures to kill an animal. And that's this funny situation we have, right? Like that lady doesn't have to kill that snakehead if she chooses to release it. The young man can release that fish. That's this conundrum we're always going to have. And so we have to be careful about this catch and release versus catching kill, right? There's no such thing as that black and white. And it's this moral judgment people have. So bottom line is what we've done here is we set up a system where people can register for free. You log your catch using the iAngler tournament app. And then we get live monthly drawings with Fish Talk magazine. So Lenny and the team at Fish Talk, starting the first Thursday of May, we'll do drawings for prizes. We actually have a major backlog of some prizes from last year that I'm shipping out in the coming week to make sure folks have the good prizes we got from a lot of our sponsors last year. Here's some of our sponsors, and we're continuing to grow this program. We have a big launch at the Bay Bridge Boat Show, April 12th through 14th. And if you go to our Instagram, heck yeah. That's the team at Fish Hunt Maryland and the Catfish Trail, MDE or DNR and the Maryland Department of Agriculture is doing a big push on specifically blue catfish. But because of Yamaha and these partners, we're giving out prizes each year. You can see there's information here about the Catfish Trail. And ultimately, this is just some information about these species. And so what we're able to do by reporting data sets that could be 1,000 entries by people, we're providing them to the biologists at Maryland DNR. And they were actually able to use our data in a scientific manuscript, a scientific paper that said, well, because of the data provided by these rec anglers, we now understand that there's multiple age classes of fish. Because if you catch a blue cat that's little, we know that it's a young fish. If you catch one that's big, we know it's a big fish. If you catch little ones, or it's an old fish. If you catch it in, I think in 2019 and 2020, DNR first started noticing young of year blue cats in the upper part of the Chesapeake. That's the kind of information we need when we're trying to manage an invasive species. So what do we ask people to do? Again, enter for free. You go out, you catch the fish, you report it through the app, and that data is provided to DNR. We also want to promote absolutely everything that's happening in invasives. And so while Fish Hunt Maryland and a lot of the folks at Maryland Department of Agriculture and elsewhere are promoting blue cats, where you can buy them, who you can buy them from, opportunities for markets, all this work is stuff that CCA and my day-to-day is overlapping with to try and support growth in utilization of this resource as much as possible. But ultimately, we're just trying to get people out there having a good time and give away prizes every month. So it's fun. We want people to promote the event. Again, it's free. We're not charging folks for it. It's not exactly a tournament. Simply by entering fish, every data point is your name in the hat each month when Lenny draws the winner on Live with Lenny. And we're also going to be building out a new invasive species report portion of Fish Talk later this year, so people always know where to go find information.
Bring this up real quick. Hold on. Again, this is the fish hunt one, the Maryland Catfish Trail 2.
Yep.
So if you could check out Maryland Fish and Hunt magazine, there is actually the governor Moore right there promoting. Hey, maybe we can. You want to just let me play? I'm playing real quick.
I'm playing producer. I messed up. I took it out of the.
And we are excited to celebrate National Seafood Month.
So seafood has always been an essential part of Maryland's culture and our economy.
And Maryland's got great eats. And this year, we're adding a twist and encouraging Marylanders and our visitors to our state to try some wild-caught blue catfish in addition to your favorite crabs and your favorite oysters.
Blue catfish are highly adaptable, and they eat just about anything and grow to enormous proportions, which is a big problem for Maryland's ecology because they have very few natural predators.
And that's where you all come in.
Because while these blue catfish are dangerous to our ecosystem, they're also delicious. By eating blue catfish, you're not only helping out Maryland's ecosystem, but you're actively helping to grow Maryland's economy by supporting local restaurants, small businesses, and our watermen.
So I invite you to join me and the secretary in enjoying Seafood Month and share your favorite sustainable blue catfish recipes or your favorite Maryland seafood restaurants that you go to that feature blue catfish.
This is a problem we can eat our way out of while protecting our waterways, supporting our local communities, and enjoying some delicious seafood along the way.
That's right, because building a stronger state has never tasted so good, y'all. So let's get it, Maryland. Let's protect the bay and let's fill our stomachs.
A couple things there, yeah. So that's a good thing.
That's great. I mean, when in recent history have we had a governor promoting a locally caught seafood in that way? I mean, that's in the governor's basement, I believe, where they cooked that up. So that's pretty cool.
Yes. Yeah, that's I've seen that. Yeah.
You and I talked about it before. Anybody can look on my Instagram, which I guess is private, but it's full of me cooking stuff that I've caught, that I've brought in from the field. I've got taxidermy all over my office. And in the end, people ask me all the time, what's conservation all about? And I tell them, well, there's enough, if you save them today, there's going to be enough for tomorrow. And why? Well, so we can eat them if we need to, or we want to,
right,
or we can. And Rachel's 100% right. So that reminds me of actually an effort underway that has to be mentioned anytime that blue catfish are mentioned. I did give kudos to Whitman Wharf Seafood. I've got some of those oysters in my fridge. But Nick Hargrove and his team down there in Tillman have been cutting. They're the only place processing blue cats on the Eastern Shore, and in a traditional spot there in Tillman and Whitman, and that's great. They've made the necessary investments to be USDA compliant, which is unique to only blue cats, that this is required. It's a complete political thing. But they're actually finding out that there's some open doors that are doors opening because of that inspection component. And I hope that Nick will continue to see a lot of success in processing. But there's also a really cool champion kind of hanging out in the shadows a little bit, and that's a woman named Beth Brewster, who's the Caroline County Public Schools Food Services Coordinator and the leader behind the Chesapeake Culinary Center in Denton, downtown there. And she's leading the charge to try and find opportunities for this locally caught fish to be processed and stored in the midshore area, because Denton's right about the geographical center of the Chesapeake, of Delmarva. But ultimately be able to store this kind of protein, because they saw during COVID, doing some of the community work that she does with her network, that you just couldn't get protein to people during COVID that were in dire need. And especially in Caroline County, and they're like, we have the Choptank River, we have the Nanacoke River, we have Marshy Hope, like there's fresh seafood everywhere. It's an absolute travesty it can't be here available to our communities. And so those are some of the people that we're working with, that if folks stick old talking points of OCCA's out to get you. This guy, he's a rich developer who just wants to take out Waterman. Well, you're missing the opportunity to actually find solutions like Rachel mentioned, because those will be positive local jobs and positive local protein feeding Americans. And that's a good thing.
Well, I tell you what, is that hope I can get you, after this is over, get you back, because I'm not going to go into the whole spiel of the oyster thing and the concrete and all that good stuff, I don't want to get in. I don't think we should get into that. Yeah, I live right down here in Denton. So, that's Caroline County. It's been good. Has anybody else got any kind of questions for him? I think, huh? Oh, I keep telling you, I got 2 puppies. They're only a little over a year old, and they're over here fighting. They're over here. They were walking around. I'm trying to get my wife. Can you please get the dog? Because the last time they were there, they knocked my camera over the other day. See, they're having fun. That's all right. They get along great. It's great. I got 2 sisters. The one fell through with the one sister, and I like a dummy because I lost my buddy, and it's been about a little over a year and a half. He was only 8 years old, and that was my buddy. And I was never getting another dog. Once my Saint Bernard went, I was not getting no more dogs. And like a goofball, I ended up getting 2 of them. And they're nuts.
When you're a dog guy, you're a dog guy. Like I mentioned, my 5.5-year-old and I have a 1-year-old, 2 little boys, humans. And my 5-year-old tells my parents the other day, he goes, Mimi and Pop, we're getting a dog when Sam's my age. My son, Sam, right, a 14 or 15-month-old, right? And we're like, perfect. Like 4 years, we'll get a dog. No big deal. Right. And we tried to explain to the 5.5-year-old how long that would be. And he's like, wait, I'll be 10? Oh my gosh. So I think we may have a dog in that future, but you're gonna have to talk me off the ledge. You gotta love them.
They're fun. They're sometimes it's a love-hate relationship.
My I don't know if I could ever get another yellow lab. I had a female yellow who was my hunting dog. I got her when I was 16. She made it 11 years. And the day that she died, we had to put her down after a goose hunt. In fact, the goose hunt was at Kingston Landing in a field overlooking one of the most major striped bass spawning areas that exists, right there at Kingston Landing in Kings Creek above Dover Bridge on the Chop Tank. Anyway, we're in that one field there, and I sailed a goose. She went to get it, and she disappeared for 2 hours. Something she had never done. Yeah, and we just knew she was sick. She had cancer, and we drove home, put her down. On the way home, actually, she was suffering so bad, and I was so broke up. I went home and I got in my carving shop, and I opened 2 bottles of red wine, and I drank them both, and I carved I made a pattern of a goose decoy, and I carved a replica goose decoy of the goose that we shot that she eventually brought back to us, and I carved it out of cork and cedar. And then when I finished it, I ended up putting her ashes inside of it. And so she still hunts with me. And that's my gun dog. So I told my wife, I'm just going to get a yuppie dog next time, because, you can't beat a good gun dog.
See, you're not as bad as everybody says, Dave.
No, I told you before, nobody even knows me. All these fools that think they know me. I mean, come on. The amount of BS that's spewed about this stuff. I mean, like I said, hey, you want to play out there in BS land and Facebook and just chirp a bunch, great. But the meetings are where it really happens, and I'm not being, trying to challenge people. I'm trying to tell people.
I listen to some of the meetings. I mean, I listen to some of the meetings. I think some of them. I think it's yeah. There's Rachel. It's not personal. She's the one who says you got a job to do.
Never is.
I mean, I listen to some of the meetings, and that's probably why I didn't get into politics, because I think it's sometimes it's people talking to hear people talk. It sounds like to me sometimes. You know what I mean? And it's the same thing over and over again. But you got to go there in order for things to get done.
Yep.
I'm trying to get into it. Like I said, I had Captain Robert Newberry. We talked for like 2 hours the other day, and I had so much information in 2 hours. There was no way I was going to remember all that stuff. So I was trying to go back.
It's funny too, because I laugh about some of the time that, people spend talking about me, and it comes back to me, and I laugh, and I'm like, aren't there better things to do? And he's one of them. I mean, I laugh all the time, and I keep wondering when, again, misinformation it confuses us all, and that's different than information that's not accurate, right? And unfortunately, there's certain people like him I find continue to spread misinformation about me and CCA that's just not true. And it's like, why can't we just talk about the actual system and the actual facts. And, you know, it is what it is. I don't take it personal. Because like
Yeah,
Rachel said,
I
it's
think
not
he's been a
personal.
good guy to me. He's been nice to me. He's really. I was supposed to go. I was actually invited to go to. They just had a meeting not like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. It was the whole meeting about the lawsuit. He told me to bring the
Yeah.
podcast in there, but I had
Yeah.
already had plans. I already had a date. I went down to Henlope and Bait and Tackle. They just they went from the old place that the owners owned for like 30, 40, 50 years, and the owner passed away, but he moved it over to a different building, little bigger building. Man, he's got a little bit of hunting in there. He's got all kind of local guys in there. He's got some, I mean, he's got it really nice. We're going to try, I think he wants me to come in there like once a month.
Nice.
And, you know, do a podcast once a month, you know, I was trying to, this whole podcast was really to kind of promote local stuff. Like we're going to next Tuesday night, I'm having Damian Cook on. He's got the world record snakehead, northern snakehead. He caught right here in Maryland. And he's going to come on. He's got a guide service. We're going to, we're going to be talking about Dennis Rich. What county do you,
Oh, this is great.
What's that?
This is what I was telling. So Dennis, I'm just going to take this at face value, right? You guys tell people about a meeting 1 or 2 days before it happens. LOL. Who are you guys? Because it's not my job to tell you about a meeting, and it's not Sam's job to tell you about a meeting. So clarify that. The reality is that, again, part of the reason I do this work and part of the reason CCA exists, because of all the things I'm seeing highlighted. The meetings are far away. I'm at work. All these things are happening. Well, somebody needs to be present at these meetings, and they do, whether we like it or not. They are posted. They're public, and there are laws which require the state or the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries to do things in a public fashion. And so it's not just about sitting in and getting into a live stream. I started attending Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission meetings in about 2007. And so when I say show up at the meetings, I mean commit. And that's where you need to be. And it may not be you, but it won't be me forever. But people are best suited when they're represented in centers of power, you know, places where these decisions are being made. And not to get all philosophical and stuff, but it's why voting is so important. It's why knowing your local representatives, whether they're Republican or Democrat or something else they decided to make up last week, like, you know, that's irrelevant. They're still the ones making decisions, you know, and that's important. You know, I live here in Baltimore City. I pay a lot of taxes. I want to see these sewer systems fixed. Do I think it's going to happen? Unfortunately, no, it doesn't seem to be the priority of people, at least in the timeline that I want it fixed. And that's a harsh reality that we all have to deal with. But if we think of each other as, oh, CCA, and the reason that Conowingo is a problem is because CCA is not involved and there's a conspiracy theory there, then guess what? The powers that be are getting a free day to actually not have us focusing on them and instead be arguing about something that's just some fantasy that somebody created. And that ends up happening all the time.
I've heard this a lot about the blue cats, about the processing plants. You can't get in because that supposedly the catfish has to be inspected by, I think it's an FDA. So they got to actually be inspected before they can be cut. And that's the only, David Confera said, that's the only fish that has to be inspected because the people down in Louisiana, I think he said like Louisiana, that has all the farms, the farms down there that raise the catfish for processing, that they had such a problem with it. Now it's got to be, now you got to have it inspected before it can be, and it's such a, as she's saying, that is such a hassle to do, where, I mean, to me, it's like, see what I mean? It's just, it can, I would be drinking. I'm not even, I would definitely have, like you said, a bottle of wine when I come home every day. Because I can tell you, man.
I mean, we've been watching 2018-19 was the big turning point for blue cats in Maryland waters because of all the fresh water. That was the most, like the freshest period on record in this 2018-2019 overlap, the calendar year. And pretty much after that point, there's blue cats everywhere. And it just blows my mind that we as a state, and that means all of us, have taken so long to recognize the impact they're having, what the train that's been on the tracks, and also just have not take advantage of the opportunities. And it doesn't mean I have all the answers. Again, collectively, like, it blows my mind that we're in this situation, but I'm most optimistic right now because of our governor, our Secretary of Agriculture, our Secretary of DNR, Fish Hunt Maryland, making this robust investment to make sure people are aware that this is an opportunity for them. And when it comes to the inspection piece, as I said earlier, it's the USDA, and like they said in the comment, you've got to have somebody on the line. And so if I remember this correctly, like it says right there, the inspectors have to be there for every fish that's cut. So if you've got 3 8-hour shifts, just doing simple math, 24 hours divided by 8, I know it's not that simple. But ultimately that means you'd have to have 3 inspectors to work their way the entire time you're cutting those fish. And that's expensive. I mean, think about it. If they're a full-time employee, they have benefits, or they're a contractor or whatever it might be, it's one more headache. Their car could have a flat tire and you could shut down an entire line of people with a fresh seafood product that the clock is ticking. And so it was absolutely a political attack, and it was Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana and such to defend their turf for the American catfish farmer. And I'll tell you, the Chesapeake Bay states, especially Maryland, we got our clock clean politically when that happened. Like I did say earlier, though, the people that have the inspection definitely have a leg up on people that want to start processing catfish, because good luck getting it done. I mean, it takes a lot of hard work, and thankfully some people have. And again, now those people are finding opportunities because of that inspection. So it's like, I've heard for a couple of years now, well, we need to get rid of the inspection. Well, how? And, where's our delegation? And so again, it's actually, speaking of Tillman, speaking of Whitman Wharf and Nick Hargrove, I think just last week we had a whole bunch of leaders from our state and from our federal delegation announce some major actions that have been taken. And again, fantastic. It's awesome. I mean, people have been looking for support and opportunities. There's Maryland DNR, Maryland government people, up at the Boston Seafood Show. There's people working on international markets for blue catfish. And all of this is still in the face of this inspection requirement. But I think this is the opportunity that everybody should ignore some of the nonsense. Recognize that I don't think striped bass is going to turn around anytime soon, either on water or on paper. But regardless of what you see on water, the management system kind of is on the track it's on. And the management system is saying that the population is declining. So I really encourage people to start looking at these other fish as opportunities for fishing, but also opportunities for business. But again, the watermen are in a tough position. It's not that simple. And it's really, it's heartbreaking.
I put
I keep waiting to find that money everybody says CCA has too, because I know we're an hour, almost 2 hours into this thing and losing viewers. But the conspiracy theories about how we fund my job, our operations, just crack me up. Like we've got trust funds or money sitting around. The gray on my beard and the hard work I do with a lot of volunteers raises money that we have to operate here, and that's an important thing for people to understand. There's no big bad puppet master anywhere. I answer to Marylanders. My bosses are all 100% Marylanders, even though that our national office is based in Houston. And that's actually why CCA has been so successful, because it's given people the ability to engage on a state level using tools and an organization that's part of this bigger piece of the puzzle.
what is
Which committee are you talking about, Dennis? And who's your brother? And you're right. Most people don't listen to anything. You're 100% right. No question about it.
When I was listening to that oyster meeting. Oh, here we go. All right, come on. Listen to that oyster meeting. they were talking about money, the Rockfish Committee.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, I was going to say if he means the commercial committee within DNR, I mean, I'm not surprised. I mean, it's complicated. and again, I'm the person that continues to engage in this process, even though wondering sometimes, like, why do we do it? And I'm asked that by our members often, like, how do you do this stuff? Forget the personal attacks. Again, I let them roll off my back, but like going to these meetings and having DNR or any entity, right, any government that's not accountable to a person or people or an organization ignore you or tell you no. And it's very frustrating. There's no question about it.
Yeah, what was I going to say? I just forgot all that. Yeah, I mean, I just the one guy, in the meeting, it's funny how they were talking about the first thing he said in the beginning, all right, it's like we got to watch the money. It's about the money. So when we decide when we're doing all this stuff, this is the oyster stuff. We got to see the money. And then I see one guy, he's talking about bringing a shell from over on Pacific Ocean where you got to truck it in, you got to clean it. I'm thinking that don't seem really cheap. And then the other guy, he's got like a half an hour, 40-minute thing. And all he was talking about bringing shell to the Chesapeake Bay from Vietnam and China on a barge. I'm thinking, I don't, I know they're just proposals, I guess, but I don't know. I don't want to get into that because it's like I said, we already been in here on 2 hours, and I'm thinking but maybe we'll have you on, and and I'll have some other good questions for you for all the oystering, because I know Rachel, she just got done. I think she's taking a little tiny break, even though she was working on her boat because she's getting ready for crabbing. She's not out yet. I know Confair, I know they're all switching over, getting ready to start doing some commercial crabbing. So, and the good thing is I get to go out. She lets me be a part of it. I could go out whenever I want to go. See, she don't mind having some people go with her because, it's, not only do you help, but, she gets to have the company, But when you tell them, yeah, I got to go pick you up, I'm going to pick you up at 2:45 in the morning. A lot of people say, oh, no, that's okay. Oh.
Hey, Rachel, can I invite myself to go crabbing with you? If Sam's there too, you got room for 2 of us? Because I'd love to chat with you about it. We can do another one of these. Heck, I'll come over to Denton.
Yeah, you want to come over, Denton? Come up here and sit in my room, and you can pet the puppies while we. There you go. She said, absolutely. You want to go? We'll get together. When she starts crabbing and the crabbing's doing good, yeah, that's it. You can be calling crabs. We're gonna.
I'll help out. The best part about I'm perfect at a crab feast. I love to cook them, and I'm allergic to the damn things. It's the most depressing thing you can do to a Marylander is make them allergic to crabs, and it happened to me. So they tell you in puberty you might change a little bit, right? You get some hair here, some hair there, you start stinking. Well, I became allergic to crabs. Freaking depressing.
Oh, yeah, that would be my. If anything happens with that, see, my wife is an absolute. She is. I told you this is what started it all, Dave. I took her out one time. We were out on Dundee. Oh, I got rid of the picture. Oh, too bad. So sad. I got rid of the picture. But we were in Gunpowder. When the first time I ever took a crabbing ourselves, I took a crabbing, and we caught like gigantic blue. I mean, they were gigantic. I got a picture of it, and she's been hooked ever since. Now she is. I don't care what time she will go. I can get her up and say, we got to be on the water at 5. She will be up at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. Lunch is made, coolers packed, baited trout line. Everything's ready to go. Ask her to go fishing at 7 o'clock in the morning. Nah, that's all right. You go.
I don't blame her. I joked that I fell in love with my wife when I took her shad fishing at Fletcher's Cove on the Potomac. We've been dating, I think, about 4 months. And it's the first time we've been fishing. I hand her a fishing rod with a double shad dart rig, and she flips it across the Potomac, hooks 2 hickory shad, brings them in, turns around, holds them up, and is like, look what I caught. Releases them, casts again. And I knew she had been fishing before, but it's the first time I got to see it, it happening right there. And I'm like, all right, this is good. Well, then I meet her dad, and he's been a lifetime surf fisherman. So he raised her right. And Kelly loves to fish. We don't go crabbing because I'm allergic to them, but I also just pick up the phone and call CJ Canby when I need crabs. So,
well, that's good.
Catching them.
So maybe we'll set up another time to how about we'll come up and we'll talk oysters, and we'll talk more catfish to see how the CCA and all the catfish catches are going. Because usually, you have a really good tournament in the wintertime for pickerel. That's a pretty good that's a pretty popular fish to catch too, isn't it? A popular program you guys put on during the wintertime.
Yeah, we have like between 60 and 90 people participate the last couple of years, and they use iAngler. They fish for 4 months, and they consistently log their catch. And actually, I just gave that data to the USGS, a scientist that is going to take those pickerel pictures that we capture and use them for some software. He may, I'm not sure that he's going to, but we gave it to him so he could. They've developed an AI system that can identify an individual fish based on comparing its markings across its body. And so I thought, well, with pickerel, the computer's got to be able to see all those distinctions, you know, and all the little chains and all the patterns on their sides. That's pretty cool. So I'm like, here you go. And so some of the pickerel data we have actually has locations if people give it to us. We require that if you want to win a prize in the invasives count, we require location, but we're not sharing it with anyone. It's just for the scientific work. But ultimately, by having that data, we could actually conceivably identify whether or not somebody caught the same fish already over the last like 4 years or so that we've been doing the pickerel championship the way we have. So it's kind of, there's some really cool stuff we can do with the data in that event. And it's all about promoting people getting out there, having fun, sharing what they love, being out on the water. I mean, you're always going to hear me encourage getting along with each other, sitting down and having some dialogue. And that's what fishing's all about. I mean, you know, fishing, people that love to fish are always going to be hard-headed. We're always going to be passionate. You know, if anybody wants to wake up early in the morning to go hang around a bunch of stinky stuff and maybe catch a fish is kind of crazy. We have to admit that. But I encourage people to, you know, talk it out, work together. All that complexity, Sam, you're talking about, all this crazy crap we're talking about tonight, people feeling overwhelmed by it is partly by design, but don't let that win. You know, work hard to find people in your community that can represent your interests, but also keep your eye on the prize, on the long ball here. You know, keep an eye on, this is a marathon, stay involved, stay passionate. One term we use in fisheries management and all this stuff is it's akin to making sausage. Sometimes you don't want to see what goes into it, but the goal here is to make something that's palatable. It is very difficult to do that in these current conditions we have in the Chesapeake Bay, whether it's an issue with Conowingo, whether it's with sewer, whether it's with climate change and the current weather patterns, whether it's with all these regulations that some people like and some people don't. None of this stuff's easy. Let's not pretend it is. So let's try and at least find some commonality. We all connect at the resource level. We all say all the time, you know, if you're in trouble in the water, the waterman's going to be the first person to help you out. There's no question that people that work hard on the water are just like all other blue collar workers, hard workers that are salt of the earth people that want to take care of each other. And guess what? If you start talking about people as rec, commercial, waterman, this, that, the other, this group, that group, you lose that real human opportunity. So bottom line is, you know, come on out, get involved in this stuff, help shape it for a positive benefit. And Dennis, I see your question there about yellow perch. I'm not 100% up to speed on the yellow perch management right now, but I know it's on DNR's website. DNR does assess yellow perch populations in regions. And so whenever they cut quotas, it's because of whatever their surveys tell you they estimate the population is in a certain region. And if I'm not mistaken, it's like Upper Bay, Chester River, and then I think everywhere else are the zones. So depending on the location, it would depend on their estimates of population, which is something they've been doing for about 15 years now. So you can actually find that online. And there's actually staff members on the DNR website. They should have their contact. And there's some fantastic people doing this work in the field at DNR. I mean, as knowledgeable about fishery you can ever imagine. It's where I've learned so much that I understand about this stuff.
That's really weird. What I ain't posted. I'm sitting here and somebody's telling me that my YouTube, that the comments from YouTube are not coming up. Because I got more. It's showing that I'm live on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's showing that I'm live on YouTube. Somebody on YouTube tried to leave a message. I think a couple guys did earlier, and then all of a sudden it's all. I haven't seen one in a while. Damn River Boys, but you got 14 people watching, but I don't see any. Why do they?
Yeah, they have to be logged into YouTube also, I think, to comment. There it is. There's a message.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right.
Either way, we've
got a message. He's got a message.
30 seconds, 2 hours.
Yeah, that's cool. But yeah, if you want to go with me and Rachel, yeah, I'll like I said, I usually video her. I take you know, she lets me put her on a YouTube channel and stuff, and I usually have fun doing it. The oystering is kind of fun. The one time we went out, the first time she went to take me out oystering, man, I mean, I know we were hitting 5-foot waves out there, 5-foot rollers. Good grief. I don't, and when they're doing it, when you're dredging, I mean, you just don't realize how much that boat tips, you know, and you got waves. Yeah. So we ended up coming back that day because that was one nasty day. But we got a 50-day calm day the next week. So that was really nice. It's really interesting to watch them do that. And man, that is not an easy job.
Yep.
I mean, it's just
No.
not an easy job.
No.
I mean, even the crabbing, she does it by herself. I'll tell you what, she'll really she'll work you. She's going to work you. She pays me. I'm tired, and she's still, and so she'll get up at 2:45 in the morning. She goes, does her crabbing all day long, and then she's got to drop it off at her buyer, and then she comes home, and so she's got 4,000 feet of trout line to unbait and rebait before she's even done to go in the house. So that's hard living.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, Dave, I appreciate it. It's been 2 hours. We're going to have you come back on. We'll talk oysters if you want. Maybe we might even try that. Maybe as the season starts or something, because it's just got that over.
Yeah. I mean, just to give people a little precursor to that, like this is the image over my shoulder here is a reef ball, and the whole idea is it's a painting of a reef ball, and this is actually like a spiral of fish coming out into the ecosystem. And so this is what a reef ball looks like. This is a little model. But this is what we build. We build these out of concrete. We do it throughout the state, and we deploy them throughout the bay at permitted reef sites. And there's been a long standing.
You're going to get me talking about this shit, aren't you?
No. I'm gonna close out. I'm just gonna say there's just like everything.
I'm messing with you.
Well, just like everything, you've got the bottom, right? And it's public. There's a long history of oysters, of clams, of pound nets, of crabbing, of all these traditional uses. Then you got recreational uses, a bigger population of people. And so you've got a public resource, right? There's permits, there's oversight of all that. And so we do the work we do on the artificial reef front with 100% permission and oversight by the various agencies. And there's been a long history of evolution of artificial reefs, anywhere from dropping like subway cars out in the ocean, sinking ships, dropping barges. The work we're trying to do, and one of the reasons we utilize concrete is we know the source, it's brand new, and it's known to not have a negative impact. And we're building an engineered model of a reef. And so we're building an oyster reef that the goal is to replace years upon years upon years upon years of shell with 2.5, 3 feet of height. And an animal or a reef ball that has concrete on the surface where animals can attach, like oysters, but also on the inside that can attach. And so you get a lot of beneficial habitat, a lot of beneficial ecosystem that fuels the fish. And that's why we do it. We say habitat today equals fish tomorrow. And that's our intersection with the whole oyster conversation. It's highly complicated. I'm happy to do it whenever you're ready. And I think that'd be a great one to do in person, to be honest, if that's possible. And
we can meet halfway. I tell you what we'll do. You come to Denton. We'll go right down into the Market Street pub, and we'll actually do the live right inside of because I've been there. And we'll go have a burger, and we'll sit down and we'll talk oysters, and we can just come down. You don't mind coming over here, do you? How far you live from here?
I'm in Baltimore, but I travel all over the place. So,
well, you come down here, and
I used to, before I got married and had kids, I used to keep a camper in Oil City and hunt all over the place. And one of my good friends is a farmer in Denton, and he and his family tills about 6,000 acres. So I've been wandering around that area a very long time. Having a good time and chasing critters and hanging out with good people.
Here comes the oyster questions.
We're talking about next time. I'm not taking the bait. I'm not taking the bait. Let me show you one cool thing oyster-wise. Hold on.
There will be nothing better than having oyster shells. But I would say this real quick. If you realize that Maryland sends 3 tractor trailer fulls of oysters out of state, and we'll get into it later. I don't want to get, because once we start talking about it, before you know, we'll be on here for 3.5 hours. But yeah, I mean, we're not saying we definitely are not saying it'll work, because Rachel's on here. We had the discussion. We know it works, but I know that in Virginia they supposedly had an issue. Yeah, see, there we go. All we need is to keep our shell. See, we send, I think we caught like 600 to 750,000 bushels of oysters last year, but we only got 110,000 oysters back. So we sell the oysters to processors for, we'll just say at a low number of $5 a bushel. But for us to get it back, we have to pay $8.50 to get the shell back. And so I'm thinking whoever made that stupid deal, well, the deal supposedly is that once we sell to the processors, we're supposed to get it back, but that's not working. So that's a big issue. It's the shell. We can talk about sanctuaries. We can talk why we got sanctuaries, why we're not open. We can, trust me, we can sit down there and we can talk about it. And Dave's, I can see, look, he's chewing his gum.
Look, I got dressed up for the occasion. I'm wearing my reef ball costume. So, no, I'm not going to continue to talk about reef balls, but we can talk about that. We can talk about what Dennis mentioned about the shell. I mean, oysters have an extremely long and complicated history in the Chesapeake. That's definitely been more complicated recently, from about 08, 09, or really the low point in the harvest, which was during the Ehrlich administration, I think 03, 04 era. The low point, fears that the population was gone forever, that the fishery was dead, to now being back out at a recent high point in harvest, and seeing a lot of really good spat set out there across the bay, which is a really good thing, which is of course, the baby oysters for the future. So why did they dig up the oysters in the upper bay and take them down south?
That's man. I think he's talking about man-o-war shoals. Why we're not taking them.
Yeah. This is something else we can talk about.
They're saying there's life there. I think they were talking about not taking it because there's over 250 million bushels of shell sitting on upper bay. And so look, see how we're already starting to get into it. But it's okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to answer the question pretty quickly. They did it because there was shell under the bottom, which could be dredged with a mechanical dredge, put on barges, and then placed throughout the bay wherever it was needed. And that was an industry-driven program. It was done for 46 years. I just put in the chat, that's me commenting on the Outdoors in Maryland name there, the SaveManowar.org. Man-o-War Shoal is the place that they're looking to take shell from next. And it's been a political and policy battle for a long time that CCA has been involved in. That's why this website exists. It's our perspective. There's a video that was shot a while back that references some legislation. That was prior to the pandemic, but we have been involved in supporting legislation that would say you cannot dredge Man-o-War Shoal. And that website explains our perspective and some of the history on it. But ultimately, shell is very important. I saw the question come up about shell versus reef ball. It's all relative. It depends. Ultimately, the calcium carbonate component of concrete is very similar to the shell. A shell is ideal. It's what nature intended. Nature intended oysters growing up all over themselves, like my ridiculous costume here, like the reef balls allow. And we do place some reef balls in the water that are already covered in oyster spat, hatchery spat. So spat that will come from like Horn Point or other places, and we actually put them in tanks and attach the baby oysters to the reef ball, and that's where you get what I'm wearing. A reef ball completely covered in oysters. We also place them just as concrete in places where we know there's going to be good spat set, like Tangier Sound. So we placed a lot of concrete in Tangier Sound recently, and we're going to be looking at what kind of attachment rates and what kind of benefit there has been. Because Sam, the question of is concrete good, is it bad? Well, it's a very complicated answer, but it's a debate worth having, and it's a conversation that we should be having. No different than the shell situation. We've got to have a solution to retaining our shell here, or identifying sources. And we say no to Man-o-War Shoal, but a lot of people say yes in the Waterman community, and that's always going to be a debate.
Yeah. Well, that could be a debate for another time. I tell you what, we'll text, and it can be anytime. I mean, I don't really go too far from the house. I'm actually getting ready to go down and hang out in May. I'm actually heading to Virginia. Let me tell you what, Virginia's got some freaking crabs down there. They are not beat up like they are up here in Maryland. I went down there with Paulie from Fish Hunt. I went down there and stayed with him, and we were red fishing. I got a puppy drum. We caught some speckled trout. I mean, there was crabs floating around. Every pylon on every freaking dock had crabs laying on it. I was like, my wife would never leave Virginia. You know what I mean? She would never leave Virginia. I told her how many crabs there were, so so I'm going to head down there in May. I'm going back down there with Paulie, try to finally catch some redfish. They're getting ready to, it's like
Paulie talks a good game, but he never invites me hunting or fishing. He just posts it all over Instagram and shows off. But it's
Right.
like I never get an invite. We'll see if he's still
Easy
on
sir.
here. Well, and also, so I know we talked about the invasives count. And we talked a little bit about the Bay Bridge Boat Show, but April 12th to 15th, if folks are in the area, come on over. Kent Island, Bay Bridge Marina, the Bay Bridge Boat Show. We're going to have a whole interactive thing talking about a lot of the invasive species stuff going on with Fish Hunt Maryland, with DNR, with CCA and others. Fish Talk Magazine will be there. So there'll be a lot of cool information. Folks want to come out and have a conversation. I'll be there Friday and I'll be there part of Sunday at the Bay Bridge Boat Show. So, my job is to be involved in these conversations and working with y'all. Again, happy to talk with anybody. And hell, I've been talking for 2 hours, 15 minutes tonight. So
yeah. Shit. So I'll be there Sunday. I will definitely have my camera, and I think my camera woman's coming with me. Maybe she's coming with me, and I'm gonna do some interviews down there. So as many as I can. I'm going down with Hogfin Apparel. They're gonna be down there. We just had an interview with them ladies. Go check that out. That live stream. I had all them 4 ladies on. I know Kayla's coming with CCA to do something, right? Or did she do it already?
No, we've got that actually tomorrow night at Union Craft Brewing in Baltimore at the brewery there. Kayla, Hale, Dave McCullum, and Dylan Waters are all coming together to do a 3-part panel talking about alternatives to rockfish. Kayla's a rock star, great angler. Dave's a great angler, both of which both recreational and commercial fish, and I consider good friends, great people. Dylan does great promotional work, works at Fish Talk a bit, and then also does DNR work. And our website, the ccamd.org, our calendar's on there. People can subscribe, and we've got a link tree. We've got tons of ways to stay involved with our stuff. And hey, like I think everybody gets the point tonight. This isn't about right or wrong. It's about dialogue and trying to find outcomes. And in the end, we could argue all day long, but if DNR is doing what they want, guess what? We wasted our time. So it's all about getting involved, getting educated, and working together. This is our resource to figure out together. It's not one group versus the other. I want to buy local seafood from my seafood market, but we got to get a lot of things right to maintain that. And, recreational fishing is not the end of commercial fishing, and vice versa. We can find solutions, and we need to.
That sounds cool. Dave, thank you so much for coming on. If you want to stick around for a little bit when I end this, and then I'll talk to you for a second. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button. If you hit the like button, that always helps any YouTuber out. All right. You all have a wonderful day. Thanks for coming by.